Have you ever hired someone who looked great on paper? They interviewed really well and it just felt right at the moment. And then a few months later, you're thinking, this is not what I signed up for. But then the cracks start to show after a few weeks. They're missing deadlines. Some of the customers are complaining that they haven't heard back. There was an inappropriate comment. Now, hiring is a prediction problem. You're trying to guess how someone will behave in the future. Your brain doesn't like this uncertainty, so your brain reaches for certainty the same way an exhausted athlete reaches for hydration. As John Maxwell says, 80% of your success as a leader is who you let through the front door. Hiring is not luck, it's a probability game. Welcome to Lead to Grow, the podcast where we explore the people principle, how human success drives business performance. Today we're going to be looking at the question as to why you keep hiring the wrong person and what you can do differently. Have you ever hired someone who looked great on paper? They interviewed really well and it just felt right at the moment. And then a few months later you're thinking, this is not what I signed up for. Now, if you haven't, you may not have hired many people before. But if you have, you're probably wondering, is this just luck or is there a better way to go about it? Now, hiring the right person is one of, if not the most important thing you can do as a leader of people. As John Maxwell says, 80% of your success as a leader is who you let through the front door. Yet so many leaders get it wrong, and for some reason, many are not seeking to get better at it. But that's not you, because you're here. So today I want to walk you through why this keeps happening, what's actually going on in your head when you hire, how you can materially increase your chances of getting it right, not perfectly, but substantially better than most. If you want to succeed as a leader, this could be one of the most important episodes for you. So stay tuned all the way through. All right, now let's start off with what takes place. Now, the way most managers have learned how to hire has been from what they've seen and others do. There's a phrase from many, many decades ago that is, nobody ever got fired buying IBM. Now, this relates to people always buying IBM computers back in the day because it was a safe option, which is maybe a bit outdated today, but the principle exists in other parts of business. For example, if a company gets audited by one of the big four and it goes wrong, then you're less likely to get fired. But if you didn't go to the big four, well, in some circles, you get blamed for the result because it's like, well, why did you not go with the big four? Why did you not go with the safe option? And that's how it relates to hiring too. Someone has resigned or been fired. Now there's a vacancy to be filled. Now the absence of this role creates pressure for the team, which then creates more pressure on the hiring manager. We need someone to hit the ground running, they say. So time to hire becomes an important metric, as does experience, especially industry experience, because our industry is different, right? So they put up an ad, maybe speak to a few recruiters, give a brief to HR, and the expectation is to see resumes flowing through in the following week. And that directive is made very clear to those who are hiring. So therefore, resumes appear. Now, we love a good resume. We get one, we read it, we start to craft a story in our head. We look and we go, this person seems dynamic. It's like, I like how they've done X or Y. They could fit in really well with Susie. Then we meet the person, good handshake, seems pretty switched on. They know their stuff. I like them. Let's get them to meet Johnny. Hey, Johnny, I think I've met the guy or girl. I want you to meet them. Let me know what you think. Then Johnny gives it all clear. Then you do that with the next person, and now we're all on the same page. But we need to check those references. If those check out, I think we're good to go. So you talk to this person who you've never met, who doesn't care about you and doesn't want to cause a problem for themselves or their former employee, and the reference happens to be glowing, as is the other one. So we're feeling pretty good. So you make an offer and they come on board. We are confident we've hired the right person, which is what you tell the team, and with only a couple of weeks gap between the last person and this person starting. Everything's going well. Now, in the first week, the feedback's great. Everyone gets along well with them. You're really happy with your choice. But then the cracks start to show after a few weeks. Then in the following months, it really starts to become an issue. They're missing deadlines. Some of the customers are complaining that they haven't heard back from some of the actions that this person promised. There was an inappropriate comment that one of the team members didn't like, but maybe it's just a one-off. You get to their 6 months and you're a little bit unsure. Their knowledge is kind of not what it was meant to be. And they have these habits, these bad habits that they brought from this competitor. And they keep talking about this competitor, which is a little bit annoying. The overall shine starts to wear off. Maybe we should extend probation. Now, your capable HR consultant tells you this is not a real thing, but you let the probation pass. And in several months, you realize, okay, this is not working. I got to come to terms with the fact that it was maybe not the right decision. Now, we've lost 9 months by this stage, and we've been paying a salary to a person who not only is not adding value, they're destroying relationships, causing rework. And you think to yourself, well, look, you never really know. And you go back to the hiring process and do it all again. So is this luck, or can you actually improve your chances of hiring? And the answer is unequivocally, yes, you can improve it. But before we get into solutions, we need to delve into why this problem exists in the first place so you understand why the solution works. Now, hiring is a prediction problem. You're trying to guess how someone will behave in the future. Your brain doesn't like this uncertainty, though, as to whether or not this is the right person. This takes too much glucose, energy. So your brain reaches for certainty the same way an exhausted athlete reaches for hydration. Now, the certainty that it seeks is often not accurate. Let's walk through some of the main biases that quietly shape our hiring decisions. This can and does affect managers of 20 plus years experience, but new managers are particularly susceptible to it. And this is because new managers have always felt that they could hire the right person if only they received the right opportunity, given they've seen other managers get it wrong so many times. And many of us believe that we can read people. And to an extent, this is true. But the true power is being self-aware enough to realize I'm not as great at reading people as I think. Now let's start with the affinity bias. The affinity bias is that we naturally gravitate towards people who feel familiar. Maybe they have a similar background, similar communication style, similar energy. When someone feels similar to us, we feel really good. It's like this natural instinct to determine who is part of our tribe. Now the trouble is you're not looking for a friend. You're looking to hire an employee. Unless you don't have friends and your business is just about paying someone to be a friend, which is not what I'd recommend. Maybe join a book club or take up pickleball. This is business. This is about performance, and that's what you're trying to achieve. Let's go to the halo and horns effect. So they have one strong impression, whether it's good or bad, and that spills into everything else. Maybe they're articulate, and so we assume they're organized. Maybe they're a bit awkward early, and so we assume they lack confidence. I remember interviewing this guy. He looked totally the part for the profession. He was very articulate, and his first answer was really strong. As we progressed through the interview, it started to become apparent that the capability was not there, and it was very late in the day. My mind just wanted to skip to the end. But the structure forced the remaining questions that proved critical to the right decision. Now let's go to confirmation bias. And so this one's subtle, but incredibly powerful. So imagine there's a party and I'm leaving the party and you're arriving at the party. And I say to you, hey, see that guy in the red jumper? He's a little bit weird. Be careful of him. So you avoid him and you see him walking around. He's got some eccentric movements and that sort of thing. And you finish the party, you're like, oh, I'm glad I avoided that guy. Now let's go same party, same scenario. I'm leaving the party, you're arriving, and I say to you, hey, you know that guy there over there in the red jumper? He's very eccentric. He looks a bit strange, but he's a really interesting character. So then when you see him, you see his hand movements and you go, oh, he seems quite interesting. And you go up to him, you talk to him, and you find out he's really interesting and he's eccentric, and you have a great time. And you go, hey, that was great that you mentioned that to me. Same scenario, different statement, different expectations set at the start. So what you were looking for was confirming what you already thought. Now, this happens in interviews because we have a view of this person, whether it's from a resume or from what someone says, and we're just asking questions just to confirm what we already think. Remember, our minds hate uncertainty. So that's what we're doing. We're not actually critically evaluating what we're hearing. We're just confirming an initial bias. So this confirmation bias comes back to that example I talked about, where after the first interview, you thought, yep, this is the person, and you were just getting other people to confirm what you already thought. And it was a false confirmation. It was false evaluation because now you thought 3 people agree, but they're only agreeing with what you originally said. Let's go to conformity bias. There was a study that showed when faced with a choice of 3 different length lines and asked which one is the same length as another line, 9 out of 10 people chose clearly the wrong answer when they had heard everyone else choose the wrong option first. In this study, there was only 1 actual participant and the others had been planted there deliberately to give the wrong answer. Now, how this takes place when hiring is when 2 people are interviewing the same candidate and the most senior person afterwards says, that was a really strong candidate. Now, the more junior person may have some reservations, but because the senior person was positive, they don't voice their concerns. They tell themselves, they have much more experience than me, and so they don't want to look silly by raising irrelevant points. They agree with the evaluation, and they both move forward confidently. Okay, let's go to contrast effect. Now, this is the final one I'll talk to, and it's very common. The comment starts with this. Let me look at the top 3 candidates. We love the number 3 for some reason. Let's not go down a rabbit hole, but as to why. But that's a question for another day. So you're not asking, is this person right for the role? You're asking, who is the best compared to the others that I can interview? So what you're doing is using the comparative criteria. All 3 may be right for the role, or none of them might be. You're choosing an arbitrary point in time to decide that the right candidate has come along because it's convenient. It's important to understand these 2 things are separate. You're not asking, is this person right for the role? You're asking, who is the best compared to the others that I can interview? So what you're doing is using the comparative criteria. Now, all 3 may be right for the role, or none of them are right. You're choosing this arbitrary point in time to decide that the right candidate has come along because it's convenient. It's important to understand these are separate things. 1 is you need to have the right candidate present themselves, and 2 is whether or not you've actually come across the right candidate. Some of you might be thinking about your friends and their romantic partner selection process, but again, let's not go there. Same thing can happen. So let's look at the absolute criteria. And so the issue of not using this is that you're out of the race when you actually need to be in it. So what should you do? So rather than the comparative criteria, which picks the best from a bad bunch, the absolute criteria assesses the person against what you need for the position. Now, let me use an analogy which might make sense. So you're holding a relay baton and you need a runner to take this baton to the other side of the oval to win the competition. Now, all these runners are coming past you. Most of them are terrible. Like some of them are falling over themselves. Some are running backwards. Some are not even paying attention when they're running. You get a bit impatient. So you look for the 3 most fit runners that seem to know what they're doing. And then you go, okay, which one of those 3 should I give this baton to? And you only have 1 baton. So you give the baton over, you turn around and you walk back to your seat. As you're walking back to your seat, Usain Bolt comes running past, but you were no longer standing there. You don't have a baton. All right. Now, if you had waited just a little bit longer, you could have given the baton to Hussein. Now, I'm not saying that this is an obvious thing. Let's say it's 1998 before no one knew who he was. The point is, if you had the right criteria, you could have said no to all those runners, those 3, and still been there with your baton when the right runner was coming along. And this is the same as what happens when hiring. Once you've hired somebody, you're out of the market. Unless you're hiring en masse, okay, if you're hiring 10 people, that might not happen, but usually you are hiring 1 person. And so you hire this person who's the best from a bad bunch, you're out of the market. A few weeks later, a few months later, the right person comes along and you're not there. So using the absolute criteria allows you to screen out all those 3 and to screen in that right 1 person. The other thing that people do, which is a mistake, is they find that right 1 person and go, I need some people to compare to. And because they can't assess that person on their own, they hold that person back. They wait for another 2. And meanwhile, that right person has moved on. So the absolute criteria is so important to use. Now let's talk about the Venn diagram of assessment. And I'm going to introduce this segment by giving a statement that when I say it, people realize how contradictory most hiring approaches are. People hire based off experience and qualifications, yet fire based off attitude, aptitude, and behaviors. Every time there's someone out there who didn't work out, it's often for these sorts of reasons. They're not picking things up quickly enough. They have bad habits they brought from the competitor and they seem to refuse to want to change. They keep making obvious mistakes. They're not gelling with the team. People are complaining about them. Customers complaining that they're just not hearing back, or they just don't want to deal with them. The deadlines that you set for them are missed. Despite letting them know countless times what you want them to prioritize, they seem to continue to focus on the wrong activities, the easy things that don't move the needle. Sure, there may also be some gaps in their knowledge that you thought would be better, but if someone has a great attitude, they have the aptitude for learning, and they're displaying the right behaviors aligned to what the role needs, for example, being organized, good relationships with people, etc., you tend to see the return on your time and energy put into them, and you can see it working out. So what is the Venn diagram of assessment? Well, this has interlocking circles that each represents an assessment activity that you use during your hiring process. And what you're essentially trying to do is to predict the future. And more specifically, what is the performance and behavior of this person going to be when they come into a job in your company? And if you accept that you're not a genius people reader, neither am I, then you need some tools to help with this decision. So they include a structured behavioral interview, a personality profile that is valid and reliable for hiring, aptitude testing, their behavior observed throughout the process, phone interviews, possibly a work sample. Now, you may notice what is glaringly missing are reference checks. Now, let me be clear, you should always conduct reference checks. You want to have 2 previous managers and confirm they are actually who they say they are. However, a glowing reference is kind of not relevant. This is a person who doesn't know you, they don't care about you, they have completely different standards possibly. The role in their company may be very different for the most part to your job. And they just don't want any trouble from their former employees. So this glowing reference should not be held with high regard. However, someone's behavior of avoiding giving you references, that can be telling, or if a reference is something like, oh, they were late every now and then, you want to pull that thread because it's probably a lot worse than what they're saying. So the positive reference, don't give a lot of weight to, but still do them, because if there's some odd behavior around it, or if the references are not great, then got to look into that. Okay, now back to the Venn diagram. Now what we have here are the tools that have a decent enough predictive validity to be used in a hiring process. And when they're combined, they work together to provide even greater confidence that what you think you're going to get is what you're actually getting. Now let's start with behavioral interviews. They're based on the premise that past behavior is one of the best predictors of future behavior. These are the questions where the candidate is asked to provide a specific example of a situation they've been in at work that is behaviorally relevant to the role. For example, the most popular one is, tell me about a time when you've dealt with a difficult or upset customer. Now, rather than asking for a hypothetical or general response, you want that specific example. The difference is what someone specifically did is often different to what they tell you what you should do. Now, you might be thinking someone can just make this up, right? Which is technically true. And that can't happen, but the evidence indicates that it's a lot more difficult than what you think. For instance, people don't actually know that the example that they gave was not great customer service. So behavioral interviews indicate that they may have the competency to perform certain parts of the role, not technically, but from a behavioral standpoint. And this relates to what we said earlier about why people hire versus why they fire. Now, if we look at personality profiles, this will indicate whether someone is energized by a particular task or if it saps their energy. Now, one of the biggest issues with performance is that the person in the job doesn't enjoy the key tasks that they need to complete that leads to success. They tend to go to what feels comfortable for them. So if you know up front that that person, say, doesn't naturally like tracking deadlines, and that's important for the job, then you can make an informed decision amongst everything else. Aptitude tests come in many shapes and sizes, some more valid and reliable than others, some more suitable for the role than others. There are verbal reasoning tests, numerical reasoning tests, which may or may not be relevant. However, there is one test that I've found highly relevant across the majority of positions, and that's inductive reasoning. This is the ability to solve problems with incomplete information. It's that figure it out factor. People with higher inductive reasoning tend to be able to understand a concept and apply it in different situations. Whereas if inductive reasoning is lower, they can become stuck where new variables are involved, even though the core principle remains. Now, we don't need them to be Einstein, but at a certain level, lower inductive reasoning can be problematic in a lot of situations. Now, if we look at the behavior between different stages, that's an interesting one, because this is when they've stopped putting in as much effort, and you can see whether they do what they say they will do, or how they interact with others, and other important observational information. So you piece all this together and you start to see if that same issue is present across multiple assessments. And this increases the chance that this issue is going to show up in the job. And then the question becomes, is this actually a deal breaker or not? And that'll come down to a range of factors. So including, what are their other strengths? How important is this weakness for the job? What is your motivation to coach and develop them in this area? Because as a manager, for example, if you don't love managing deadlines yourself and you don't love coaching people on that, and this person they don't like managing their own deadlines and it's really important for the role, that's potentially going to create frustration for you. But if that's something that you are happy to work with them on and they're excellent on the other parts of the job and you can set them up for success, then potentially that can be okay. Each situation is going to be different. But the point is being able to have valid and reliable insight into the candidate. And that these are the things that drive performance, not the things that don't drive performance. By the way, some of this content from the Venn diagram is based on the Schmidt and Hunter 1998 research on predictive validity. But for the most part, it is based on my direct experience for more than 20 years across thousands and thousands of candidates. So then you might be thinking, well, okay, so we have increased the quality of the person, that criteria. And now we've got valid and reliable assessments to be able to identify that. But hang on, no one's going to get the job now because the bar's too high. This unicorn with all this attitude, aptitude, and behaviors that we love, we're not going to find them. So now let me explain to you how you can get over this challenge. Now, there's a concept that some of you may have heard of called blue ocean strategy. So we're going to borrow some of their terminology by W. Chan Kim and Renee Melbourne. I'm going to oversimplify it here, but essentially it's about making your competition irrelevant by finding customers where others are not competing. The red ocean is where all the sharks are fighting the scraps, but the blue ocean is wide open, there are no other sharks in there. And this parallel exists when hiring. So if you think about it, everyone's trying to fight for these same number of industry candidates, right? To get that industry experience so they can hit the ground running. So what happens then is the standards drop when it comes to attitude, aptitude, and behaviors because there aren't that many people in this category. And so this is tempting to try and go for this person, and I'm not saying that there aren't excellent people in your industry performing a similar job. I'm just saying that you're not likely to hire them. Or just say you are successful in hiring one of them. It's not going to be a repeatable thing, especially if your business is looking to grow. So let's look at what's going to be repeatable, because if you're hiring people over a period of time, you want a repeatable system. Now, this is particularly important if you're looking to deliver a premium solution to your customers or potentially trying to challenge the way the industry operates. Like as Bain & Company would say, you're an insurgent business trying to change the quality of delivery to customers in your industry. You need a higher caliber human being. Also, that whole thing of unlearning bad habits from your competitors, that can be really hard to change and very annoying. So imagine you've got this very large pool of all these candidates, and every time you add in this criteria, I'm going to call it the static criteria of, say, 5 years experience, or they need this particular CRM or this particular ERP, you're dramatically shrinking the pool of possible people. Yeah, so you think about 5 years experience, that gun with 4 years experience just got screened out. Or maybe you need this particular CRM or ERP. 95% of candidates don't have that. So, but that can be gained reasonably by the right person. So we want to focus on the dynamic criteria. These are the things we've already spoken about, like learning agility, because that's going to give you an increasing return. So we reduce the static criteria to increase the size of the pool. Now you might be thinking, is this guy just anti-experience? Not at all. And in fact, given now I have a lot of experience in my field at this point in time, I might have a bias towards that fact. But there's two things to consider. First, this is what I've seen works. And I'm not talking about no experience. I'm talking about reducing the minimum needed to get a look in. Second of all, one of the worst measurements of experience, generally speaking, is the number of years. It's inaccurate to what a person might bring. Have they actually got 20 years experience, or is it 1 year of experience performed 20 times over? What have they done with their time there? The other thing is 2 years at one place may be far more valuable than 5 years at another place, just depending on what they're involved with, the pace of the work, the expectations, who their leader was, all these sorts of things. So the main thing we want to do is just expand that pool to be looking in the blue ocean, not just fighting in that red ocean, so you can maintain the high standards of the human being. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is not hiring itself, but what goes around it. The days of hiring someone and then letting them sink or swim, those are over. So if you're going to hire this excellent human being who has the potential to thrive in your business, you need to have the right environment for them to be successful. I'm just going to list them out here because there's not enough room in this episode to cover them all in depth, but we will no doubt cover them in other episodes. But things like your new entrant training process to help them learn your ways. Good leadership, because they're not going to thrive with bad leaders. Role clarity, clear performance expectations, a transparent and fair reward structure, a psychologically safe work environment, career developments to help them to grow, and many more things. The point is, it's about having an integrated approach. Now, the final thing that's really, really important to not put yourself under pressure is to have the right holding pattern when someone leaves. If you're under too much pressure when someone leaves your business, you're going to have this pressure to hire fast, and you're going to be tempted to create a medium to long-term problem just because you've got a short-term issue. So how you can set up the team to be temporarily sufficient whilst you're taking your time to hire that right person is so important. Now let's bring it all together. And if you take one thing from today, let it be this: hiring is not luck. It's a probability game. And most managers are playing with the wrong rules under the wrong pressure with the wrong tools. The default approach looks sensible on the surface. You've got a vacancy, the team is stretched, you need some relief, you reach for that certainty, you look for safe, the right resume, the industry experience, a good handshake, the feel-good factor, the confidence in the room. And before you know it, you've written a story in your head about who this person is and who they're going to be. Your biases have kicked in. Affinity bias, halo, horns, confirmation, conformity and contrast. Now you're not even assessing anyone. You're just confirming what you feel. And that's why so many leaders end up hiring just based off that experience and confidence, and then firing based off attitude, aptitude, and behaviors, which is where we flip the whole thing. So instead of the comparative criteria, picking the best from whoever happens to show up, you move to the absolute criteria. Does this person meet the standard required to be successful in this role, in this business, with this team right now? If the answer is no, don't hand over the baton, because once you hire that person, you're out of the market, and the right person's about to run past when you're walking back to your seat. The Venn diagram of assessment is something that most managers don't use, and it's actually what increases your odds. Resumes are not predictive. The general chat is not predictive. A reference check might be necessary, but a glowing one is not predictive. The confidence comes from stacking tools with real predictive value. Structured behavioral interviews performed by a skilled interviewer, a valid and reliable personality profile suitable for hiring, the right aptitude tests, observed behavior throughout the process, a work sample where relevant, and other activities around the hiring that help to predict performance. The point isn't to be perfect, it's to increase your chance that what you think you're getting is what you're actually going to get. Then we dealt with the next problem. If my standards are too high, no one's going to get through. And that's when the blue ocean thinking comes into it. Many businesses shrink their pool by obsessing over static criteria like years of experience, exact industry experience, exact knowledge around a system. Then they wonder why the quality is average. And so the answer to this is simple. You're just fishing in the same pond as everybody else. So you widen the pool, you reduce the static criteria just down to the very minimum that you genuinely need, and then increase your standards on the dynamic criteria, their attitude, aptitude, and behavior. And finally, and this is the part that matters if you actually want the person to stay, hiring is critical, but it's not the only thing. The days of hiring someone and just letting them sink or swim, they're over. And if you want great people to thrive, you need the infrastructure, such as training, leadership, role clarity, clear expectations, fair rewards, a psychologically safe environment, development for them. Hiring great people into a weak system doesn't fix the system, it exposes it. So the real message here is that great hiring is not an isolated event, it's a system. And if you build a system, you stop getting unlucky and you start making better decisions repeatedly. Thanks for making the time today. I'm Tommy Sim, and this is Lead to Grow. If you found this episode helpful, feel free to share it with someone who might also get value from it. If you're watching on YouTube, you can like the video and subscribe to the channel to see future episodes. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, you can follow the show. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, a 5-star rating or short review really helps more people discover it. New episodes come out regularly. Hope to see you again.